Hi all, we're going to have a look now at Anand versus Ivanchuk in round 8 of the Linares 1991 tournament. Ivanchuk had just drawn 2 games in his previous rounds and was ready for another really big fight in this round, it seemed. Anand, who's the world number 1 in 2007, was still very high rated back then, but just 2.635, and Ivanchuk was 2.695. Anand kicked off with e4, and Ivanchuk played the Sicilian defence. So we have here some standard moves in the Sicilian, and in particular we have this a6 here inviting a Najdorf, but actually after bishop c4, e6 was played now, which is the Scheveningen setup with these 2 pawns in the centre. So they're quite flexible, and white must watch out for later black playing either d5 or e5. In this game, black managed to play both of those moves, freeing the position up for the black pieces. White castled, and now Ivanchuk played bishop e7, and now bishop b3. So now Ivanchuk just castled, so it seems quite an elegant position and theoretical. f4 was now played. So one idea of f4 is positional as well as attacking. If f5 is later played, perhaps white's idea is that after e5, white will try and gain control of this d5 square. So this becomes an interesting theme for the whole game, this d5 square. Who's going to sort of have domination of that square? And is white going to be able to get a bind on it? Now b5 is a very logical move, preparing the queen's bishop fianchetto. And you'll notice from b7 it puts an influence on the d5 square, as well as this diagonal generally. Now f5 was played. Perhaps it was prematurely played, because black also was threatening b4, which undermines white's control of the d5 square when this knight has to move now. So b4, and the knight moves to the edge, but also in some variations this knight will be a tactical liability on a4. A knight on the rim is dim, as they say. You'll notice that the e-pawn seems to be in pre here, but that will give white a lot of compensation in this particular position. But let's have a look. If white had played knight ce2, there isn't so much compensation. Simply e5, knight f3, now just check, and knight takes e4, and black would be clearly better. So with the knight on a4 there is some compensation. So let's just quickly put it into Rybka as a new variation. F takes e6, and it actually gives clear advantage to white here. So why is that? Because this e6 pawn is now attacked by the knight and bishop. So that's why. And in the variation, if black plays e5 now and knight takes e4, let's have a quick look at this. Then queen d5, so attacking the rook and knight. So basically, here there's no queen b6 check, which is critical because that knight's on a4. Because if there was queen b6 check, the king move bishop b7 would protect these 2 pieces. So that's the reason why it makes the difference, the knight going to a4 here. It's a tactical justification to do with this e4 pawn. Anyway, so e5 was played, knight e2, and now we see the battle for d5 continuing with bishop b7. So this bishop putting pressure on that square. Knight g3, so white's trying to strengthen this square, e4 as well. Knight d7, now queen e1, so attacking this pawn, but also the queen might be useful later if this knight moves to come to the king's side on this diagonal. a5, note also that this a6 square is vacated, which is useful for the rook to move to, which it did later in the game. Now c4, so in some lines c5 might be playable. Black's got to keep a nice blockade on c5 now, and also with queen c7 first, and after queen e2, rook fc8. If black gets enough time, there'll be this plan of bishop c6 and harassing this knight on a4. White played bishop g5 now, and now knight c5. So actually inviting white to play knight takes c5 here. But this might be very bad because if queen takes c5 check, and if the king moved, then a4 followed by queen takes c4. Let's have a look though if bishop takes e3 was possible here. Say bishop e3, just queen c6, and e4 is a big problem. So white's got to be very careful in this position not to quickly relieve this problem knight with knight takes c5. So rook ac1, Now h6, encouraging white to take on f6, to seemingly, gain a bit of control of d5, because this would be a key defender. However, this dark square bishop would be very dangerous, for example, along this diagonal. So bishop e3. Now black is careful not to allow bishop takes c5. So he wants to have this plan still of bishop c6. After bishop f2, now rook a6. Now there's several ideas here. First of all, to stop knight b6 in some variations, but also that it prepares this queen b8 to a8, attacking this e4 square. So this lovely rook move is, very elegant for what it achieves positionally. Rook c2, now queen b8. Rook e1, now queen a8. So black is really intensifying the pressure on this diagonal, and not just d5 square, but also the e4 pawn. Queen d3, now knight g4. So black takes time to snap up this dark squared bishop. But it does seem to lose control of d5, but we're going to see something quite spectacular now, very soon. After knight df6, knight d2. So Ivanchuk takes the bishop now. So his preference now for bishops, after his wins against Karpov and Kasparov, where he had a preference, it seemed, for knights. Now bishop c6. So he's after this knight in some variations. Maybe queen b7 to d7 might be a threat to try and win this knight, because it wouldn't have anywhere to move. So here Anand begins an evacuation for this knight to move this bishop here to play queen c2 to be able to double protect it. So queen a7, threatening queen d7 perhaps to molest that knight. King e2, now rook d8. Now the reason that queen d7 wasn't immediately possible is because of c5, attacking this Umpri rook. So black has to be careful. He plays rook d8, and after bishop d1 he concedes that white will now be able to play queen c2. However, this is the moment where Ivanchuk plays a startling move, ripping open the position, exploiting the slightly insecure position of the white king on e2. He plays d5. It's a beautiful breakthrough in the centre. It opens several lines. After c takes d5, knight takes d5, ed, rook takes d5, white is in clear trouble. Rivka actually gives black as almost 2 pawns up here. It's actually losing for white in all variations. For example, queen b3 was played. Let's have a look at queen c2. Say check. And now knight c4, rook a d6, believe it or not. Just exploiting that pin, threatening rook d2 check. And white is defenceless here, like a rabbit in the headlights. After b3, check, and this sequence, it will be really crushing for white. It will be white's just being torn to bits, because you can see the black pieces just coming in. So this is an amazing breakthrough sacrifice, which seems to work out very well in all variations. Queen b3 was actually played, and after bishop g5, white is again defenceless, because now Ivanchuk is exploiting this Umpri rook as well on this diagonal. White played rook c2, and after bishop takes d2, Anand resigned. He resigned because if rook takes d2, not rook takes d2 check, but actually bishop b5 check. And where is the king going? It would have to leave the rook and pre on d2. So that was a really crushing game. Let's just rewind just slightly though. In this position, Rivka has a fantastic resource. Instead of bishop g5, there was actually an even stronger move here, which is rook takes d2 check, a non-human move, because after king takes queen f2 check, say bishop e2, now bishop e4, and white's king would be trapped in the centre, because this bishop's stopping, the c2 square, and black is now threatening rook d6 check, and after this harmless check on c8, king h7, white will be all over because of this rook d6 threat. So that was even stronger. But anyway, the way Ivanchuk played it was winning the rook on d2. Let's have a quick overview and summary. A Sicilian defence going into the Scheveningen variation, where white's always got to be on the lookout for d5s and e5s, which liberate the black position. So the control of the d5 square was critical in this game, as well as this knight on a4. These were the two major themes. And Ivanchuk masterfully rerouted his pieces around the d5 square and this knight by playing this cunning move coming up, which was rook a6. So lovely move, threatening to exert more pressure on the diagonal, but also stop the knight from coming to b6 in certain variations. And also the rook could swing over if the liberating d5 was played later. So we saw now this beautiful breakthrough sacrifice after Ivanchuk took that bishop on f2, and it's as if white was about to relieve his problem knight on a4. Just at that moment, Ivanchuk unleashed d5, ripping open the position, exploiting the king safety problem of white's position. So after this, it was just all over for Anand, who is actually the current FIDE #1 and world champion. But this game was